Joining me now is Richard Miron. He's the director of For the Birds. Interesting. Richard, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. You spent 5 years following a woman with 200 birds, turkeys, etc. Why?
Well, I started out because I was interested in animal rescue and animal rights questions, and I volunteered at an animal sanctuary in upstate New York that rescues animals on a daily basis. And while I was volunteering there, they heard about this woman named Kathy who had about 200 ducks, chickens, geese, and turkeys. It was considered a hoarding situation. It was described to me that way. And so I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. I hopped in the car with one of the rescuers and we went and met Kathy, and she was super warm and welcoming. She really loved her animals. I just found her to be a really compelling person. And I just saw a little bit of a disconnect between how much she loved these birds and how much the sanctuary was worried about them. And she also lived with her husband, and her husband was overwhelmed by the birds too. So I was just really drawn into this situation, and I had to keep following it. So I started to develop relationships with Kathy and her husband and the sanctuary, and just tried to get all the perspectives, and things kept escalating.
Well, so Richard, you received a lot of credit for the different perspectives that you put into the movie, and very well received by the critics. So that's why I'm partly fascinated by it. Like, what? Okay, so let's break it down one by one.
Sure.
I'm going to ask a simplistic question. You get to answer it any way you like. Who was right? Kathy, or no? Is it Kathy her name?
Yeah.
Or now she's trying to do right. They both had come at it from their own perspective. I get that part. Yeah. Or the people from the animal sanctuary who are also trying to do right by the animals. Who's right?
I mean, that it feels like a trick question, because for me it feels like right versus right, and that's what I mean. Like there were issues with the birds. A lot of them were not in great shape and needed veterinary care. So Kathy definitely had too many birds at the beginning of this story. But in terms of her intentions, I felt like everybody had the right intentions, and so that's kind of where the clash comes in for the story. And I try to be empathetic to everybody in the situation, and that was the challenge of making the film too, because everybody, from the media, it became a legal battle, and the media picked it up in this local town, and everybody paints Kathy as a hoarder, and that to me just felt unfair to just cast her as somebody cruel to animals without kind of seeing the layers behind that. So the movie just tries to kind of undo those labels.
So Richard, I'm in the labeling business. So
sure.
Okay, so I'm going to adjudicate all this. Okay. And you got me interested enough to want to watch the movie so I could more thoroughly adjudicate. Okay, but I'm going to do a little bit of it right now. So we're going to get to the husband in a second. Teaser for that, he's totally right. Okay, but we'll get back to him in a sec. But between the animal sanctuary folks and Kathy, I have to ask you a question first. What were the animal sanctuary people, or two questions really, what were they most worried about? So why were they going after Kathy? Like, what's the origin and genesis of that? And what did they want to do with the birds instead?
They were most worried about the overcrowding of the birds, because there were certain diseases that were spreading among them. So they wanted the birds to have more space. They wanted the ducks and the geese to have water, which they didn't have a place to swim. And so that was actually the sanctuary's goal. And they had a small pond on their property, and they were connected to other sanctuaries with ponds. But their goal was to give these birds a happy life, a happy long life. And this whole story exists in a space where nobody eats animals. Nobody thinks about eating them. Everybody wants the best for them, which is also kind of part of the way I wanted this movie to subvert the real world, outside of this.
Right. But Richard, to be fair, if they did eat them, there'd be less of them, and problem might be solved. Okay. So, all right, I say that as a carnivore, easy for me to say. Okay, but I love coming to conclusions. I still don't have enough information. This is a very good trick you've got, Richard, for making everybody watch the movie. Okay. So let's go to the husband. I think that's an easier one. So, what was the beef, if you will, that the husband had?
Well, there are multiple things. One was a very physical thing, that the birds were inside the house. They were smelling, they were defecating in the kitchen, and it was constant trying to clean all that up. And he worked a night shift. He was just hearing squawks all the time whenever he was trying to sleep. So the very physical closeness of the birds was a problem for him. But also, I think the attention that his wife was giving to these animals, and the lack of attention she was giving to him, I think that it was just overwhelming their marriage in a way that he was longing for simpler times. I mean, he's a people person, so he loves to have people over all the time, and that's part of what the film explores through home movies. We look at all these parties that they had together before the birds entered the picture, and then slowly, as the birds grow in population, the people fall away. And so Gary wants to reconnect with his wife and with his friends, and he can't do that with the birds around.
Yeah, so that one's simple. Gary's definitely right. Yeah, I mean, if I had birds pooping all over my kitchen and I couldn't see my friends.
Sure, yeah, a lot of people relate.
Yeah.
He's kind of a key perspective in the story. I think a lot of people connect to that.
Okay, so I think I'm gonna try to get to the heart of the situation. Why?
Okay.
Why did Kathy all of a sudden start bringing all these birds? Did you ever figure that out?
Yeah, so it started with one duckling about 10 years before I started shooting. Kathy and Gary were dog and cat people. They had a lot of pets, but this one duckling wandered onto their yard one day and didn't have a mother to care for her. And so they bring in this duckling, and they're caring for the duckling. And then Kathy gets the idea that this duckling needs friends. So they order some more ducklings through a farm catalog and just start kind of breeding a population, and it becomes her hobby. So I think there was this spark of joy that she got from coddling a baby bird and getting different breeds, and it became her hobby. It was like her full time. She wasn't working, so this was her job at that point.
Yeah.
And at first, it was fun for Gary too. So
yeah, I get it. So it's like that song, "Animals are innocent." So there's a certain attraction that a lot of people have, especially in these tough times where we're seeing so much ugliness from humans around us.
Totally.
That the innocence of animals is really alluring, and perhaps a little too alluring for people.
Completely.
But I actually want to talk about one more thing, which is the art of filmmaking. So you spent 5 years doing this. Were you doing something else as well in those 5 years, or just this?
I was working as an editor on other documentaries for the first 3 years of it, and then went into editing this one as well, along with, and I built a team, and I was trying to fundraise and shoot this movie while I was working on other movies. But at a certain point, had to kind of throw myself fully into it and figure it out, because it was a difficult web to untangle, this story. So
yeah. Well, it seems like everybody agrees that you did a wonderful job with it, because it's not necessarily a natural topic for everybody to flock to, if you will. But everybody's saying it was outstanding directing and compelling storytelling. But when you were going in, did you think, look, I've got a certain number of years of my life to be a director, you're a young guy, et cetera, but I'm gonna spend 5 of them on this lady with the 200 birds?
No, I definitely did not expect that. It really, the story kept escalating in ways that surprised me, and that's what kept me going. There's a lot of twists and turns that happen even after there's a trial by jury. That's, I'm not really spoiling things here, but after the trial by jury, there's even more that happens in Kathy and Gary's relationship, and these sort of bigger life lessons about family and love and care that was so deeply compelling to me and my team that we just had to keep going and we had to tell the story right.
Right.
So,
well, as my daughter would say, don't spoil the beans.
I won't. Yeah.
Okay. We got to save the beans for the birds. Okay. But all right, one last thing then. What do you think about working on next? I imagine you're going to want to, spread your wings a little bit.
I'm starting to write a comedy series just for a breath of fresh air. I'm interested in making a sports documentary as well. And then there's, I think, a little bit more unfinished business in the animal rights sphere that I want to tackle.
Okay, so that's interesting. You're not totally flying the coop.
No.
Okay, all right, Richard Miron. Everybody check out forthebirdsdocumentary.com if you want more information. Forthebirdsdocumentary.com. Thank you for joining us for a fun conversation. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, no problem. 2 easy ways to follow the Young Turks. One is hit the subscribe button down below. Then you're a TYT subscriber. And second is ring the bell. And when you do that on YouTube, you're notified of our videos.